Cool.
You and Caleb know each other, and we had this amazing conversation. And he talked about how he had transitioned from a scientist to helping other scientists find what they love. And
Yes.
when I first met you, you were doing something similar but different. You had created the money careers. And so I wanted you to tell the folks that we're talking to and that we hope are listening a little bit about your background as a PhD in neuroplasticity and why and how More Than Money sort of started. So introduce yourself. If you
Yes. Thank you, Melissa. I'm so thrilled to be here today. Well, it's a long story and it's becoming longer by the year, so I'll keep it short. I've always had a fascination for how people learn and apply their learning to become better themselves and for the world. That's really the essence of me. And I came to this work as I was born to an immigrant dad and a mother that were from two different cultures. My dad was from the very south of Morocco and my mom was Swiss. And as you can know, the Swiss Germans are not known for their flexibility. I grew up in the French-speaking part of Switzerland and nobody in my family went past ninth grade in terms of education. But I always had that thirst of learning in me, and especially learning about how people merge their knowledge and turn that into something useful to say, do, think, feel, and how they navigate the world. And so growing up in that multicultural environment, I didn't know that people went to university and didn't know how to get to university. So I left school at ninth grade and I became a secretary. In Switzerland, we have those processes called apprenticeships. So I went for a business administration apprenticeship. And then that was the first time I had a little bit more time. So I picked up a hobby, volleyball. And during that time, I was exposed for the first time to people that had more time and where the default was to go to university. And I really revisited that thirst of understanding how people think and how they might know better, but not necessarily do better for themselves and for the world. And so I really got motivated through those people in getting further education. So I went back to get my GED and then moved to Belgium for love with my boyfriend at the time to earn my psychology undergrad. And when I was in about my second year of college, I discovered the brain and that principle by which we can rewire the brain based on experience, on what we pay attention to, what we feel, and how we train ourselves to decide or not where we're going to be going. And so I fell in love with that principle and focused my undergraduate studies on it, got a full ride to come to the University of Rochester for my PhD, and then looked at when the system broke down and when we're no longer plastic and start to decline during my postdoc at Brown University, looking at mild cognitive impairment, which is a precursor of Alzheimer's disease. So I really studied that process of neuroplasticity from where it gets established to when it breaks down. And I was gaining more experiences as a scientist. I discovered that science is a great and rigorous process for understanding what's happening. But I had the hunger in me to take what we understood about those processes and apply them to individuals, organizations, or others to change for the better. And I couldn't do that as a scientist, really. And then I started to really understand, because I guess I was coming from such a non-traditional background, that when you apply certain skills, they are called differently in the business world when I was an apprentice, in the classroom when I was a psych student, in research when I was a scientist. And so I started dissociating the core skill sets you have from the knowledge you choose to apply it to. And I became really fascinated with that notion of there is a core toolbox of skills that people first learn, apply that to a specific industry or domain of knowledge that happens to be maybe their work environment, their college major, or others. And I could help them dissociate those things so that they can use the toolbox of their skills and flexibly apply them to different domains of knowledge across their career. So I was at Brown at the time, and I decided to start volunteering at the Career Center, helping fellow PhDs who wanted to go outside of academia to define what those core skill sets were so that they were able to be credible and competitive to apply the PhD skill sets to jobs in different industries using the right terminology for that industry. And so I was doing this, and then I met with Mark Albion, who was a former Harvard professor and faculty founder of Net Impact. And he'd been looking at some of those things, and we were in touch. I think it was through his book, Making a Life, Making a Living. Started those conversations over email. And then I moved to Bloomington, Indiana, becoming an MBA career coach there. And I saw exactly the same thing. Students coming with very rich toolbox of skills, just not knowing how to talk about them within and outside of business. And so I had the academic.
We have to pause. We have to pause.
Oh, sorry.
There was so much to unpack
Too
there.
long.
So
sorry.
No. But no, listen. So what I heard and what I found fascinating is that you have been resilient or had the ability to bounce back from various obstacles in your life since you were a young woman. You were biracial and bicultural. You were not influenced to go to college. You were influenced to, graduate at 9th grade and do an apprenticeship. And through movement and relationship, you ended up in the United States. And here you are, a PhD in neuroplasticity. And then you were already thinking about, well, I don't know if I want to be an academic, and I want to help other people who don't want to be academics unpack or keep their brains flexible. And so that goes to those other things about being innovative and entrepreneurship. And I think that's where we're headed now, because this meeting of you and Mark evolved into a business. So tell us.
Yes. So the bouncing back in resilience, right? When I was at Brown, it was a big deal to step away from academia because everyone that I knew was an academic.
Oh, yeah.
Including my husband at the time. And so to fess up and go to all those people and say, it's not you, it's me, I'm going to do something completely different and become a career coach was a pretty big deal, right? And as I was thinking about our conversation today, I was thinking, what makes people have the chutzpah of doing that kind of thing? And I think for your audience is that reflective awareness of where did I use this in the past? How did I adapt in the past towards that better future? And how can I use that reflective awareness with gaining more knowledge about that new terminology so that I can repackage my past into my future potential in the right language? And that's really what I've done again and again as a professional, but what also helped facilitate as a coach, right? It's that reframing of your past in a future terminology that leads to credibility. And that credibility gives you the confidence to make that jump.
Let's pause there. That's really fascinating. So what I hear you saying, it's almost like, I feel like when I practice yoga, it's that pause, that meditative pause to take a step back from doing and being busy and actually evaluating what tools do I have? And I ask it in a different way when I talk to people. I say, what you're good at tends to be the things that you like to do the best. And so then if we look at those things, and you're going further and you're saying, what's the language in that economic landscape or that business landscape that you'd like to be in that they're using? And how do you translate what you did in the science world to the business world, or what correct you choose to be in?
Yeah, and basically I translate that into currency. So let's say you're in academia, you're developing gold. What can you buy with gold? Nothing. Who knows it's valuable? Everyone, right? You can meld it into jewelry, you can do a number of things, but it's not going to help you buy a train ticket, right? So if you think about different employers as buses, like Jim Collins' analogy of the bus, where a CEO or HR person is the driver of the bus and they want to go in the right direction, getting the wrong people off the bus and the right people on the bus, and then on the right seats on the bus. If you think about your resume, you're at the bus stop. When the bus comes, you want your resume to be in the right format. Might be a smart trip card from DC, might be a zip card from Tokyo or another. And you have to have the right currency there so that when you touch it to the reader, they will say, yes, you're the person who's going to go in seat X, because I can recognize that. And that's the analogy that I've been using with a lot of my coaching clients, where I say you have many valuable things. Do you have them in the right format and currency for potential employers to recognize them as such?
I just had a thought when you said the currency or the format. It's almost like languages. If we're not speaking the same
Exactly.
language, we could be saying the same thing, but we're not hearing it or we're not understanding it.
We are not recognizing its value because to us it doesn't mean the same. And yes, language is absolutely within that realm. I like using currency because after all, careers is about making money. And so people connect to the money angle there. But yes, you're right. The credibility comes through terminology, which is meaning you inscribe to certain words, right?
So I want to digress for a moment because there was something that you did. You asked me to be a guest. I can't even remember. It was with some fellows, and you built this mosaic of skills and interests and whatnot. And one of the cool things you said was, we have a lot of different things we do. And so if we're doing this assessment of our skills and the things we like, but we can't make money doing all of them.
That's right.
And that it's really, really important and valuable if we're going to be innovative or we're going to think about continuous learning and upskilling to figure out what has currency.
Yes. So one of the most paralyzing things that I find in my coaching practice is the question, what are you passionate about? Because people kind of bucket in their mind that that has to be a lifetime commitment that you have to pursue, and you don't know whether you want to make that commitment now or later, or that passion, once you turn into a money-making endeavor, might or might not be something you like to do professionally. So the exercise that I developed, and you mentioned, is the Passions Mosaic. And basically you list your passions, and then you decide the investment you want to have into your passions in 3 different ways. Do you want to turn that passion or constellation of your passions into a money-making endeavor?
Yeah.
Do you want to invest in that passion through time, further education, volunteering, board service, or others? Or do you want to turn that passion into some kind of money investment? Either you invest in organizations that are like that, you make donations, other ways that you can give money towards that endeavor, right?
Yep.
And this liberates a lot of people from the notion that they have to have only one passion. You can have multiple ones, and you can flexibly understand and make decisions about the investments you want to have in your passions. And that does a number of things for you. First off, it enables you to get energy from different kinds of investments. I still love neuroplasticity. I'm not a neuroplasticity researcher. I still read constantly about it and will download TED Talks like they're cookies when they are about brain plasticity, right? I use it as rewards, and then I implement it into the learning science that I use right now to build programs and systems to support students' learning. So I still use and invest a lot in neuroplasticity of my time. I just don't make money doing it quite the same way as building or collective knowledge about neuroscience. Also, I'm fascinated with reproductive health, and I want to provide as much as I can in terms of eradicating unplanned teenage pregnancies, Will I ever make a job out of it? No. Will I make donations or be on petitions and all of this to provide and expand those rights for young teenagers? Absolutely. So all of those things that I prioritize having an impact on in my life give me energy, either because I derive money from it through my work and connected to my passions, or because I pursue them in my own time, and or because I make investments through my money or other things that I can give away that are connected to my passions. Through that, I also build my community of people. And that goes back to some of the things you were mentioning about bouncing back, learning the right terminology, because by investing in them, I meet new people, I learn how they talk, I learn about how they shuffle their own definitions of success for their life and their endeavors in their careers. And I learn new things that I then repurpose into how I'm going to move to the next step myself when I consider one.
No, and we could talk for hours about all these different pieces, and every time we've gotten together about it, we talk further. So I'm trying to think, because we only have a little bit of time and I want to more. You've been a continuous learner, but I want to talk a little bit, because we just talked about the upskilling, gaining more skills, learning things, talking to people and that kind of thing. Talk a little bit about, you've always been an entrepreneur. I mean, you were part of 1776, the center, you've started businesses, you're starting a program. Entrepreneurism doesn't have to be your own, small micro business. It can be many different things. What is it about intrapreneurism or entrepreneurism that you gravitate to, and how can people build that in themselves?
Yeah, so I think that there are three aspects, and first let me go back to terminology, right? And I really re-emphasize what you said. You don't need to start your own thing to be entrepreneurial. And there are terminologies that are starting to emerge about, founders, which are entrepreneurs. They will build something new. And then there are intrapreneurs, or corporate innovators or social innovators that are going to be within mission-driven organizations for social innovators, or the private sector, traditional for corporate innovators, that are just those people who have a hunch to make things better when they leave than when they arrive.
Yep.
Right? So innovation can happen whether you're early in your career, mid-career, an executive, or whether you are launching your own thing. And I think the second thing that I would like to say is that it's a mindset, right? I have this constant drive to make things better. And sometimes it drives people around me crazy, right? And so Gallup has those 34 dimensions of your own unique strength. And when I read the strategic and the maximizer and achiever combination, I was like, oh my God, you guys read my mind. Right? Mm-hmm. And so some of those assessments can be that revelation and that validation to say, oh, wow, that's so me. And then you can clarify what is so you that you will find in different jobs, so that you can use that as a filter or a set of criteria to recognize when either a job, a culture, the types of colleagues, a sector, or an industry might or might not be a good fit for who you are. And when there are not everything that is a fit, and that happens for everyone in every job, you can then manage those trade-offs and find that energy somewhere else. Board service, volunteering, reading, doing other things. But that reflective awareness that we mentioned earlier become that critical piece of how do you explain that tension, those trade-offs? How do you recognize them and how do you address them to either bounce back, to envision something new, or to upskill so that it becomes part of who you can become?
And I love the way you talk about that, Mrim, because we don't find fulfillment in just one friend or one person or one job. And we have to be able to recognize that, going to a new job isn't always the solution. The question is, can we gain new skills or do something new or create something new where we are? And so I think whenever I start talking to someone about jobs and careers, I always ask first, you know, what's working and what isn't where you are, and what can you fix before we
Yes.
look outside. And if it's
Mhm.
just money you want, then go ask for a raise and tell them why, right?
Yeah.
I also
And
think,
I think I want to add one point about the brain in the situation you described, right? The brain overemphasize what we feel we don't have and de-emphasize what we're happy about.
I did not know that at all.
Right? And that's super important when we're working with career changers. And I like the way you phrase those questions. And I think that they are equally important. What's missing you want in your next job? And what do you have in this current job that you will be missing when you leave? And that last part, in general, when I ask that question in coaching, people stop. I said, I just told you I hate my job. It's like, maybe that's what is most present in your mind right now. But at some point, somewhere, you were excited about being there. What are you discounting, if anything, that you want to preserve in your next job?
And it gets back to that pause and that ability to reflect and to say, is it really the job that I hate, or did I not sleep well last night? Or, you know, is it this task or this particular client? And that reflection, you know, that expression, throwing out the baby with with the bathwater, you know, we don't need to throw it all away. And so I think that
That's
that's
right.
really, really important. Um, there was something you started going towards that I wanted to touch on more. Oh, when you talked about helping people find the right culture, the right company in the business, what I often feel people forget is that it's great to share what you do and how well you do it and everything else, and to ask good questions about a future company you might want to work with. But I also think it's really important to be able to tell people what you bring to the table, what you can do for them. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about, and I think that falls under innovation or entrepreneur. Like, I have all these skills and these talents. What is it that I do with them that matters?
So I think that the effectiveness you describe, come in context, right? Because the same skill in the same way you talk about it can be a slam dunk in one context and complete airball in the other. And this is where research is critically important. Research about the industry, research about the culture about an organization, and research about the department you will be within that organization, because they are like microcosm that live under a big umbrella. But the kinds of colleagues and how they get things done and how they like to get things done is ultimately what you're going to be contending with and showcase your effectiveness within that ecosystem, right? So if we know one thing from social psychology, is that all organizations are made up of humans, and humans are social creatures, and they function in one way and one way only when it comes to change management. And it is the following: show me the first time we collaborate that you can do things like I do them. And that will enable me to build trust with you. And then the second time we do them together, I will have that trust towards you and will be more willing to adopt something different because you've shown me you're part of my circle of trust. And so there is this happy medium when you want to convince people of what you can do for them, to say, I get you. I get how you do things and you've achieved great results with this. What we could do is this and a few other things that I can bring that's unique, that will enable us to co-create together something that we'll be both happy with.
I so I find that so fascinating, because my instinct, I get really excited when I'm talking to people and I'm listening to their ideas and whatever else. And I think a lot of other people do that too. And you're so busy thinking about and spitting out your own idea. And what I hear you saying is use that self-reflection, pause, and put on your consulting hat, which I can do, and listen and hear and support their vision so that you build the trust. So later on, you can share those innovative ideas that you have.
Exactly. And you can co-create with them, saying, oh yeah, you bring this, I bring that. How about we build all of this together so that we both feel innovative in the process and feel rewarded for working together at the same time.
So make sure you build solid trust, respect, the building blocks of a good relationship. It's all about relationships, isn't it?
It's all about trust and relationships. Yes. And so there was this African proverb, and I can't remember how it goes exactly or where it's from, but it's, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Mm.
And I always remember that proverb about innovation, about entrepreneurship, because others will question because they want to support you. And a lot of people get very impatient because they're under the gun for funding. They want to launch their next product. And anybody who slows them down, they were just like, get out of my way. Just believe what I say. Believe me. But no, when they try and understand, help them understand, because at the end of the day, those people who, when they have no vested interest in your success, want to give you a piece of feedback, that's really a gift. It will feel frustrating, don't get me wrong, but how you deal with that frustration to force yourself to listen, force yourself to formulate a respectful answer, even if it is, I heard you and I cannot address this right now, but I promise you I'll keep it in mind because I think it's a valid point we need to address later on, is a lot better than, we've thought about this already, you know? And people get really under the gun when they're innovating. I'm not saying that that is not stressful, but those trust pieces and those relationships, like you mentioned, are the best way for you to upskill, the way to drive innovation, and way to keep yourself honest and moving forward in terms of your own abilities to continue learning. And quite frankly, a hallmark of your future success, because those people will be more than willing to pick up your call the next time and suggest other things because they know you will listen.
And that is so important, that listening, you can't skip the stages is what you're saying. I mean, you can't run before you walk, or you crawl and then you walk and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we've sort of come full circle. We didn't capture, I'd love you to share how, we talked, you had been part of a startup in the education world, and
Mm-hmm.
it sort of didn't go the direction you wanted. Maybe you could briefly summarize it, but you've been doing other things. And because of that relationship, though, you got a call back, and now share what you're doing, because I think it's a great story.
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated about using technology to scale impact, right? And so education is one of those systems where that is really, really important. And first gen, I've always been very forefront in my mind as an educator. And so at the edtech company where I was for a while, we had a model where we were providing services for students in community college so that they could graduate in 2 years from community college, which is less than 15% annually in the US right now, and then transfer to top colleges to graduate in 4 years from 4-year universities. That was our goal. Fabulous company. It went far and then was sold. And as a result of that, we transitioned some of our advising things. So the department that was headed had to be eliminated, and therefore I needed to go somewhere else, which I did at Georgetown. And to that piece we were talking about shared productivity and mutual respect, that was a couple of years ago. And now the person that was my direct boss that had moved on and did other things, moved across states and everything, reached back out because she's into her next organization within the government and is now leading a new effort. And she called me and said, hey, we are doing this. Would you be interested in leading some of those things for us? And right now, I just started 5 weeks ago doing this. And so those relationships and what we co-created in one context become very important as we start creating something in another context. And that's really part of it is, wow, I look forward to working with that person again because I know her very well and she knows me very well. And at the same time, it's going to be completely new because it's new types of students, new model, and completely new environment. And so it can be very different, but with the same trust level built in.
And who knew when the department was eliminated that the way you would bounce back would be through Georgetown and doing something that's going to have such a huge impact on the men and women who serve this country in the military.
Absolutely.
with a
And so
career
that's really, the non-linear piece where that trust will take you, you really never know. And so it's not self-serving at all. It's not that I'm putting money in that bank to pay off later on. It's just people I really enjoy bouncing ideas off of and serving as a consultant or an SME or sharing contacts with them or article when I think of them, because I truly believe there are synergies between the impact we want to have in the world. And sometimes it's just for years sharing articles and just having fun, reminiscing, growing together, checking in on one another, etc. And sometimes it turns into a, hey, I have this opportunity here that is a job. Would you be interested? Right? It doesn't have to be that end goal is for me to work with that person again. Actually, I didn't have that at all. But it so happened that through very indirect channels, this is what ended up happening.
It makes me think maybe this is a brain analogy, the connective tissue of your brain or all the neurons, that if we think of ourselves as part of a larger than ourselves, part of the world, and share, whenever we think of people, we pause and you just don't know, you're putting it out, and we're all part of that connectivity. So,
we are, and there is a very interesting set of research. I can't remember the guy's TED talk, but the people you feel psychologically close to, you tend to also emulate physically in job type or lifestyle, right? And so it's really interesting that he was actually looking at obesity, and he was showing that you're more likely to be obese if the people you feel psychologically close to, not necessarily geographically close to, are obese too. Right? So something as physical as the amount of food you're going to ingest or the kinds of metabolism or those kinds of things are more likely to be the case of people that are not genetically related to you, not only family, right? So they controlled for that. But I found it fascinating that you will adapt your lifestyle, you will adapt your choices to the people you feel psychologically close to, whether or not you feel geographically close to them or not.
So it's important who you choose to be friends and professional colleagues with, because those are going to be the influences in your life.
Absolutely. Huge influencers, huge. And so it's also important what you expose your brain to, right? If you watch the Kardashians every day, all of a sudden you're going to pay attention to the size of your derriere more often than not, right? But if you pay attention to other types of pictures or social media, I mean, your brain never ceases to learn. I always say that your lungs never cease to breathe. Yet there are lots of different programs about deep breathing, alternative breathing, and all of those different breathing types that we know will make you healthier or not. Your brain will never cease to learn and consolidate that information to help you make decisions about your feelings, your behaviors, and your actions. That's what it does. That's its reason for being. And so whatever you expose your brain to, the brain's going to take that as the most important thing that they have to consolidate and influence you by later on. And so if you feed it junk, you're going to start thinking junk too. And I think that's something that not a lot of people pay attention to, unfortunately, but that's definitely what they become victims of. And especially in our polarized world, I think it has done some damage with social media.
So what I'm hearing you say is that we have to remember to feed our brain. And I love Carol Dweck, and she talks about that growth mindset. To remember that our brains are just like every other part of our body, that if we don't take good care of it, garbage in, garbage out. And
that's correct.
So I love it. We've hit on all those points: bouncing back, resiliency through continuous education, intellectual curiosity, intra and entrepreneurship. And Mrim, I so appreciate you sharing all this information today. Would you tell us where people could find you if you'd like to hear from them?
Absolutely. So the way that I most communicate with people is through my LinkedIn profile. I generally have LinkedIn articles that I put out there. I'm also active on Twitter, Mrim Boutla, my first and last name, and I'm happy to read and continue the conversation with people. And I'm actually going to publish a book in December that the working title of is Why We Fail at Career Success, for obvious reasons. And I will publish it in December. So I'll be more active during that time. And thank you so much for reaching out and for your time today. I so look forward to many more of those conversations in person or online, and hope this was helpful for your audience.
Thank you, Mrim. And you can find me as well on Twitter at Melissa Reitkopp or on LinkedIn. We like the same mediums. And we look forward to seeing you on another Bite for Thursday with our new guest that will be coming up. Thank you.